What do you do with it? He said, so we finally found a non-profit organization in third world country, and I paid $30,000 to share a t-shirt. I don't want to do that. So it's kind of the same, you know?
Smock, like a.
So that's one reason I think.
Yeah, you know what I mean, like hairdresser.
We have no
Yeah.
ways to print every t-shirt on site. We do no pre-printing.
Oh,
We have no ways to t-shirt. That's great. We'll have no t-shirts to store in boxes.
that is smart. That's genius, actually.
That's how this business got started.
Just to negotiate.
On site, on site.
Oh my God, my mom and I would kill each other.
You come up with your job.
Oh, yeah.
I
bought with Sherry Smith. I did know that. I did know she was. Yeah.
She finally kind of.
Just opened her own.
Yeah.
That's my agent. Just
And we make
turn the
it for
pages.
you.
Nice.
Do what Sherry says.
That is
So the only
great.
reason we have.
I bought my house in Coldwell
Yeah,
Bakers.
that's my size.
That's
This
great.
guy started it since he was a youth pastor.
Can you keep up when they want?
That's yours. Yeah. The name came up, and I said, no, that's not right. She helped me with my second mortgage when she moved to Washington. I loved working with her.
Because I'm
loved
I'm not
working with
young. I do all of the bookings.
My very first meeting with her.
When you're making that kind of money,
And she wanted.
you don't,
I get percent.
yeah, you just hire 2 or 3 kids or whatever.
We have 10, 12 full-time staff members. Because last year we did well over 100 events.
I've never heard of this. That is great idea.
It's been a good niche for me.
From the day that I met with her to start the mortgage process till the day I signed is 30 days. And in the meantime, I found the house. She cared. Yeah, right now, I care about that. That's awesome.
I did try to, so you didn't get my email. Sherry 2
I
years
got
ago.
it
At
late this
their
afternoon.
Oh, you still got it?
food
I
truck.
did, because I had to, I
And
did
she
the
said,
board
it's too much work to change
but,
it.
so you brought up the first
So I can't wait to see her today.
That sounds about.
and if not, I'll get,
I brought 2 pieces
keep looking.
It's okay. Any kind
I
of.
know my older.
Yeah, so I've got quite a.
There's some of my younger sons moved there to Boise as well.
Good evening and welcome to the Creswell City Council meeting. This is a work session tonight. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I knew that one.
With enthusiasm.
Thank you for coming this evening. So, I got this nice agenda here and realized, well, I have my own with all my notes on it, so I better grab that one out here. So we begin tonight with the mayor's report, and the mayor's report is that we have a special guest here, and council members, I sent you all a note to let you know our representative was coming. We hadn't planned on that a couple weeks ago, but we got a nice message saying, hey, can I come visit your council? And we said, well, we're not having a work session in August, so tonight's the night. So I want to introduce Representative Charlie Conrad.
Thank you.
And Charlie's going to come and share with us some legislative highlights of the last year. I said specifically, could you address bills that impact cities? Because that's the work we're called to do. So we want to know what happened in the legislature that impacts what we're doing here at the city council. And then council, if you have some Q&A for Charlie. I've called Charlie by his first name and he's called me by my first name, so I think he's comfortable with that. And I want to go around and have all the councilors just introduce yourself to Charlie. Tell about yourself if you want to, but make it brief because then we want to turn over to Charlie. Let's start with Tammy.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Tammy Sue Shuck, and I'm a native Oregonian. I've been in Creswell 9 years. Nice to meet you.
Let's go around this way.
Nick Smith, grew up my whole life here, city council now.
Nice to meet you.
And Dave Stram, mayor. And I've been here since 1982.
Alonso Costilla, 19 years as a resident here, and I love serving the city of Creswell. I love Creswell and doing what I'm doing here.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, my name is Shelley Clark, and I use she, her pronouns. And I have lived in Creswell since 2015, but really lived almost my whole life in Oregon. And so excited to have you here today.
Good to be here.
I'm Stacy Holt. I have been in Lane County my entire life, but only in Creswell a couple of years now.
Norma Jane Osborne, lived here about 5.5 years. I love this town. As we all do, wouldn't be living here. That's our council president right down there.
So left that little tidbit out.
I know, I couldn't let him, you know. He's in charge if the mayor can't be here, so that's an important job.
Thanks, Norma.
You're welcome.
And I'm Michelle.
And before we're, I want to make sure you've met all of our staff. I know you had a chance to meet Grace and Cliff and Claire in the back. Introduce yourself.
Shelley Humble, airport manager.
Nice to meet you, Shelley.
And
Curtis Thomas, planner.
I think that's all of our staff here tonight. Correct? And then over here we have Amanda joining us, new reporter from the Creswell Chronicle. So we're glad to have you here tonight. Okay, you've got the floor.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much for having me. I appreciate it. What I would like to start off with, I'll just touch a little bit on the legislative session. So I'm a freshman legislator, sworn in January, and it was an incredible learning experience. And I'll touch on a little bit of that as well. Then I'll get into some of the highlights, at least for me, and then some of the bills that we passed, and one key one that didn't make it, that really affects cities. But this is a discussion. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if there's anything that I can't answer tonight, I'm more than happy to look up a bill number or get some information and get back to you. So please don't hesitate to ask some questions, because there's still a lot that I'm learning, that I'm going through this process. So one of the things that I found that was really important to me beginning in this process, and I thank Michelle so much for her help with this, is networking. It's getting to know people in the community and getting to know people that pay attention to legislature and legislation, because it gives me a chance and opportunity to reach out to people. There are a lot of things that I don't know. So I've been a public employee for 23 years, police officer, law enforcement, legal Oregon cities. I've done a lot. So I know very little about very little when it comes to state government, and there's so much to learn. So I'm still in that learning process, which is why I might not know all the answers to every question that you have tonight. But I was able to contact Michelle a couple times, and she was able to give me her thoughts on a couple of the bills, and for that I greatly appreciate it. Also, I've connected with superintendents, connected with fire chiefs, connected with other folks as well. So as we get legislation, I get a chance to reach out to somebody. So I appreciate that, Michelle. Appreciate everybody that pays attention, is able to help me out and respond timely, because a couple of my emails are, hey, this afternoon we're voting on this. What do you think about this one? Because things really do go that fast at the end of session. So some of what I really learned, I get asked a lot what it was like, the experience. What is it like now? And I'll tell you, it's really an experience of a lifetime. And good, bad, and indifferent. There are ups and there are downs, but really it is. And some of that, it is learning the policy, learning government, learning how that goes. Some of it is the very specific knowledge that you get from the committees that I'm on. And some of it is just the challenges for me personally, my skill set. The reading comprehension, all those types of things. It really pushes you to that limit, and it really challenges you to do that. So it has been a great experience for that. Now, in the interim, being able to get out and start talking about it, start meeting groups, having those discussions, and seeing what's important, and preparing for the interim, or the rest of the interim, the issues that I'll be working on. And it's also preparing for a short session, which will be in February, and seeing what we can do for that next long session. If there's anything else that we need to start prepping and getting policies together, because there are a number of areas and issues, but that's certainly the case. Just a couple things, because I do mention the workload a lot, I do mention some of that. So and these are all, this is my tally, so these are unofficial numbers, so the word approximate is in front of each one of these. But there were 2,970 measures that were introduced by both chambers, so almost 3,000 measures between the House and the Senate. So that includes bills, that includes joint resolutions, that includes memorials. 775 came to the floor for a vote. So 775 times we had to vote. 616 measures were passed by both the House and the Senate. So there's a lot of work that happens, a lot of things that go forward. And I'm not sure how familiar everybody here is with the way that the legislature operates, but each of us, as legislators, we're on 3 committees. There are a bunch of policy committees. The 3 committees I was on: Judiciary, I was on Behavioral Health and Healthcare, and then Emergency Management, Vets, and General Government, which incorporates some of the city work, PERS and contracting, those types of things. So those are the areas that I'll have a little bit more knowledge on and understanding of some of the bills and some of the things that we did. There's some other committees that, certainly there are bills and things that come forward that hit the headlines that you know a little bit about, but certainly not as in-depth a level of understanding. So with that, a couple of the highlights for me that we did. So with the way that the budgeting works, and my understanding is that each session, it's a little bit different with requesting monies for your districts for capital projects, for those types of things. And this time, we were limited to 3 requests. Some of us put in a little bit more than that, to hopefully get some extra funding. I was able to get 2 projects funded. The first one is money for the city of Lowell for their wastewater treatment plant. That was on its last legs. They kind of scabbed together a system to make it work. So I was able to get some capital funding for them. And then Red River Fire Response. I was able to get some money for them for equipment and some staffing and those kind of things that they need for this fire season. So those were the 2 requests that I got. So very excited about that. The other highlight for me, it is a bill that I've got on the governor's desk. As far as I know, when I last checked, she hadn't signed it yet. But it's called the Innocent Purchasers Bill. And really what it is, it hit the paper a couple times from, I think back in 16 and 17. And what it is that there was a land use attorney that fraudulently split her property. The county didn't catch it right away. They took some subsequent actions on it. Some people bought it, and then they found out that those property lines were fraudulent, and they weren't gonna make them legal lots anymore. So what this bill did, it went to LUBA, it did a whole process, but what this bill does, it makes those lots legal. And anybody that fits those fact patterns, it makes it legal. It expires in a few years. But it helps out those couple property owners in Marcola that had this happen, so they can now use the property that they bought as they wish to do it. So I was very happy to be able to get that going, so that is on the governor's desk, and hopefully she will sign that. And touching on a few of pieces of legislation, as you guys probably heard throughout session, there were a lot of omnibus bills. There were some packages, particularly at the outset, that passed. And the omnibus bills, a lot of times there were just 5 or 6 different bills that were introduced individually, that were combined, they were negotiated, they were worked through. And with the omnibus bills, there are things that sometimes you like, some things you don't like, depending on your community, depending on your constituency, depending on certain things. So usually you don't like absolutely everything in there. But for the most part, for this district, particularly with all the smaller cities that are in here, and with the city of Eugene and the district, for the most part, there's some benefit to the community, some benefit to the district, with economic development, with the ability for cities to grow, ability for cities to have housing, start working on some of those issues. So the first one that, and I try not to use a whole bunch of bill numbers, but I'll have a couple just for reference for you guys. One of them is House Bill 2984, and which allows conversion of buildings from commercial use to housing within urban growth boundaries. So you can take some commercial buildings and turn them into some residences. So that's one of them that passed. House Bill 3197. It limits the application requirement that housing development regulations be clear and objective. So again, touches on housing. A lot of what we did was try to ease up the burden on cities to be able to zone housing and to move housing along and try to help with some of the problems that are facing with homelessness and housing issues. House Bill 3395 allows affordable housing on land zoned for commercial uses within urban growth boundaries. The one that failed, that there was a lot of discussion on at the end, and this one hit the paper a bit because it was a final last push. It passed the House, it failed to pass the Senate, it's House Bill 3414. The governor was pushing to have this. It granted her some more authorities in expanding urban growth boundaries, so there was some pushback from some of the rural areas, some of the farm areas, agricultural areas. So, per what the governor said in the paper at least, interviews that she's gonna bring that back. But House Bill 3414 passed the House, failed in the Senate by 1 vote, I think, at the last minute. So that will probably come back in some way, shape, or form, probably in the short session, at least, given how far that it went. And then one of the big packages that we passed in the beginning is House Bill 2001, and this was the big housing omnibus package bill. It's 65 pages, so I don't have it memorized, but I did pull out a couple of the highlights. And I think House Bill 5019 is the funding package for that, some of it. But it helps with youth homelessness. And it has sections about extending notification and timelines for renters who are facing evictions due to non-payment. Provides funding for some modular housing. Provides $3 million in grant funding from the Oregon Facilities Authority to support local government for infrastructure development, pre-development costs for moderate housing projects. So there's some money for some local governments in there to help with some of these projects. I don't know when that's going to be rolled out. Some of that's going to have to be rulemaking. Some of that's going to have to be programs. I don't know when the money would be available and be out there, but that should be hopefully in the near future, depending on when all that can happen. So, any questions about any of those at all?
The House bill that will help the Marcola landowners, what's that number?
That one is, I believe it's 3362. Yep, 3362.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There were a number of other bills that I was on that, that we did, particularly on the healthcare side of things, behavioral health. And some of those discussions that we had, at least in that committee, which really impacts a lot of how the community operates, public safety, what we can do for citizens. There's hopefully going to be some money out there with, the Lane County Stabilization Center, which is going to go in Eugene, is going to be funded. So hopefully that'll alleviate a little bit. Depends on how many beds they can get in there. Some of the other funding out there, hopefully, will go to help with mental health, behavioral health issues. That's one of the issues that I'll be working on during the interim, is trying to piece together what we can do, particularly for juveniles with substance use disorder. One of the things, the committees that I was on with behavioral health and healthcare and judiciary, there really was quite a bit of overlap in some areas. And youth and OYA, or Youth Authority, really was one of them. And the sooner that we can help youth with treatment for SUD, hopefully we can steer them away from going to Oregon Youth Authority and getting incarcerated. Go ahead.
What is SUD exactly?
Sorry. Substance use disorder.
Right, what is that?
Alcoholism, drug abuse.
So it's addiction, it's just a pretty word for it, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if I use anything like that, please stop me, let me know. So that's one of the things that I'll be working on during the interim. I've been meeting with a bunch of groups, getting out there and trying to figure out, okay, where are we at, specifically for Lane County? What can we do? Where are the gaps? Whether it's funding, whether it's programmatic, whether it's something else that we need to be able to do to help the youth out in that area. The other, particularly for this district, the other area that I'm focusing on for the interim, it is emergency management side of things, particularly with volunteer firefighters. What can we do to encourage people in their communities, particularly the rural areas, to get firefighters in there? This morning I met with City of Lowell, so even though it's incorporated city, they still have issues with getting people to volunteer. Met with Marcola, Mohawk, met with McKenzie Valley. there are a lot of issues with that. People just don't want to volunteer as firefighters. So I'll be looking at working with them, see what we can do. You know, if there's a tax incentive program, if there's something else we can do to try to get people, because that really does have an impact, particularly on conflagrations, for their firefighters to be able to do that. So instead of having volunteers go out to a conflagration, you've got chiefs that are going out. So there's a financial impact and also a resource impact. You know, the chief is now in a conflagration and not back at the district. So there's some issues that comes up with that. So those are really the two issues. And then whatever else, you know, as I get out and I talk to people, whatever issues they're facing, whatever things come up, more than happy to work on and to see what I can do to assist. In the short session, it's a little bit different because it is only 35 days. Long session, we could, as a member, I could submit as many bills as I wanted to. Short session, we limited to 2. I think I have both those bills identified, but we also have committee bills, so I can talk to the committee chairs if there's an issue that comes up that makes sense in the short session. Usually short session, at least funding-wise, it's kind of a rebalance. It's to shuffle monies around. There's not a lot of major policy that happens just because it's such a compressed time frame. But if there's something that makes sense, if there's something we need to change, please let me know. I'm happy to work on it. I'm happy to connect folks with whoever I can and to be that conduit to the state. You know, so as things come up, if there are barriers, if there are encumbrances, let me know. I'll reach out and see if I can help out, and I've been able to do that a little bit so far to get both constituents and governments and organizations connected to the state and get some things moving. So, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The funds that Lowell received for their water treatment plant, what was the deciding factor in that? What drove that decision?
On the projects that I submitted, and as a Lane County contingent, we got together and we talked about the various projects that we would support. So myself, Representative Fay, Representative Holby, President Polanski, Senator Manning, we all got together, talked about the projects that we were going to support, and we didn't want to double up, but we wanted to support each other. The projects that I focused on for the district, I had a request in there for Oak Ridge Fire, so I focused a lot on emergency management and capital projects, particularly for the small rural cities. So I put in $3.5 million request for the city of Oak Ridge for their airport because their runway is insufficient. There's an estimate done. I thought of all the projects that would get done, particularly as important as Oak Ridge is to firefighting in this region. That one didn't get funded. The other 2 that I put in, I mentioned, got funded. The 4th one that I put in was for Pleasant Hill High School. They wanted to improve, get some money to help with building for CTE program because they want to help train as part of CTE wildland firefighters. So to me, it was a lot of emergency management type work is what I put in for. So, but why they got
Why did
funded?
Lowell receive a yes?
I don't know. Part of the Ways and Means process, and this is the fun of going through the process the first time, is that it's kind of a black box of what gets funded and what doesn't. And on the Ways and Means Committee, which is made up of both representatives and senators, there are a bunch of Ways and Means subcommittees. Each has policy areas. There's human services, there's public safety, there are a number of them, capital construction. And then some of those members are also part of the full Ways and Means Committee, which is going to be, the speaker, it's going to be, the party leaders, senior veteran members are all part of that. And that part is a black box of what decisions are made. So whether it's regional, whether it's a combination of funding, whether it's a combination of how well it gets justified, a lot of those things, not really sure what it is. So you put it in, support as best you can, put all your supporting documents in there, and then you find out what decision they make, but you don't know how or why they made that decision.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't public records law kind of compel us to know the answers to those questions? I mean, that's kind of scary that we don't know how decisions are made.
In the Ways and Means Committee,
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily, I don't think that part of it is recorded, and I don't know if that public records law applies necessarily
That's
to that.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I could be wrong with that, because there's something.
I was just going to say, the state operates differently than the city. And in fact, one of the bills that went through this year tightened that up for the state, especially serial meetings. Serial meetings were allowed at the state. they're not allowed here. And so, so they're working on tightening up some of that law and making a little bit more sunshine on what they're doing. But yeah, they do have some gaps.
Yeah, it's kind of shady on the outside, right?
So-
Like, we don't know, as constituents, we don't know what decisions, how they're making decisions, and we don't know that they're making decisions in an ethical way. I mean, there's no way to prove that. I'm not accusing them of doing that. I'm saying that just, I don't like the black box. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, I would like to know what to say, when to say it, and why as well. The full Ways and Means Committee and the subcommittees, those are always obviously recorded, they're out in the public. But those, the chairs and how they make that decision and what gets done. Overall, there are 60 House members and there are 30 senators. So there are 90 people that are putting in requests. Again, I don't know how they go through and figure out this, that, and the other thing.
Can I ask, how much did Lowell get?
362,000, I think. And then 143,000 for Red River Fire Response.
Okay, those were pretty modest requests.
They were.
Compared to what we would ask for.
Yeah.
Or need.
Yes.
We need more, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, that may be why. I mean, because they're not the tens of the millions of dollars. You know, there's some other projects that, going through the list of what got funded, there's some projects that are tens of millions. There's some that out east. There's some courthouses. There's some various other facilities that need some of that large amount of money. But part of my decision-making process was, what do I think is realistic? I mean, I don't want to put 5 projects all over 20 million in there and
Sure.
get nothing funded, so.
Well, I was just curious about information that might somehow help us justify a request.
Yeah.
You know?
And some of for the Lowell, one second.
Go ahead.
Some of it was a back and forth to make sure that we had all the details in my office. And some of what I focused on was that, where Lowell sits on Highway 58 and how important they are to emergency management. There's always fire camp there. There's always something going on there. The fact that their wastewater treatment plant really was scabbed together because it had failed and they didn't have anything else. And so their next phase was just going to have people turning pipes, is where they're going to have to be. Also the impact to, if it failed, then it just go to Dexter Reservoir, which you usually don't want that. It's a bad thing. And particularly because they're going to be having Pac-12 championships. And the other side I focused on was the nexus with how it's impacting their growth. So I used emergency management, housing and growth, tourism, and environmental. So I tried to wrap all that into that justification to help support that and to get that going. And again, same thing for Red River Fire Response. It was emergency management side of, basically it's a civilian fire brigade, and we need to help support them and get them funds because we could have a disaster there very easily.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I think you answered my question. I was
Okay.
going to ask if housing plays into that at all because, like, we're on a moratorium, for instance, and considering our housing shortage, I would hope that it did, but you answered that, so.
Yeah, and so when I look at it, that's the eye that I look at. What is absolutely everything? What are the hot topics? What is likely going to influence a decision maker? So that when it goes into that black box, that they look at and they go, oh, yeah, it checks all these things, and this is something that's really going to have a significant impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned earlier that in the short session that you really only have the opportunity to kind of sponsor 2 bills and that you think that you've already kind of identified what those 2 bills are. And so I was wondering what they are.
The first one, it's one that I submitted this last time and it failed. It died in Ways and Means. It never came out of Ways and Means. And what it is, I've got experience. I used to supervise Lake County Animal Services. My wife is a farrier. She's been a farrier for 20 plus years and she's done a lot with horse rescues. So one of the things that was important to me is to go through the animal neglect laws and tighten them up. And so that's what my bill did. It went through and it tightened it up so that if you starve a horse to death, it's actually a felony, not a misdemeanor. And one of the things that I attached in there was a mandatory $100 fine for every animal involved in the crime that would go to 4-H or a program that taught youth proper animal care and husbandry. But because I had that grant program in there, it had to go to Ways and Means. So I think what I'll do for short sessions, I'll just take that out of there and go through as a policy, just to be able to get the animal neglect laws tightened up, so it's actually a felony to starve a horse or an animal to death. So that's one. The other one, it became out of behavioral health and healthcare. One of the things, when I talked about things that I learned, I never knew what a pharmacy benefit manager was in December. Middle of January, I knew a little bit more, and now I know a little bit more than that. Part of what I've really had to try and understand, it's that crash course in healthcare economics, and try to figure out where pharmacy benefit managers fit. So for those not familiar with the pharmacy benefit manager, they came out of, they're an offshoot of health insurance companies, and they created them. So insurance companies created pharmacy benefit managers to manage the prices for prescription drugs, and to keep them down and keep them low, which is, yes, let's keep them low for people that are actually at the counter paying for them. Pharmacy benefit managers, like a lot of large corporations, have figured out ways to garner revenue and to, some predatory practices that deviate from that. And so we had a number of bills, we had a number of discussions on how to regulate them, what the proper way to do. So some of the practices that some pharmacy benefit manager companies have, they never touch the drug, they never do anything. There's some vertical integration. So some of your large insurance companies, like United Health and some other ones, they're a health insurance company, they're a pharmacy benefit manager, and then they also own pharmacies. Some of what they do is that they steer clients through their pharmacy, so that money gets channeled all the way up through that. Pharmacy benefit managers also do what called clawbacks. So if you go pay for your prescription, the pharmacy, you'll pay the pharmacy will submit a claim to the pharmacy benefit manager to get reimbursed. There are times that, 6 months later, the pharmacy benefit manager will come back and go, yeah, we paid you too much, you owe us some more, and they'll pull money back. So a lot of what actually has happened to pharmacies, local pharmacies, one of the reasons why Bimart went out of it, doesn't do it anymore, it's because they lose money. They're on a lot of their transactions. Their costs to actually acquire and provide a prescription, they lose money on it from what they get back. And there are a number of, particularly down in Douglas County, some pharmacies, local pharmacies that have gone out of business because they can't make any money. So as you go through some of the information we're provided, out of 100 prescriptions, the pharmacy will lose on 75 of them. And they make their money on those remaining ones. And there are a handful where they make all their money. And it's not sustainable. And a lot of pharmacies are going to have business. We heard from a number of regional pharmacies, some of them that, 5, 6, 7 stores, they're even going to close stores and they can't do it. And what some of that effect is, particularly in the rural areas, is that once you lose one of your 2 pharmacies in town, now everybody has to go to that other pharmacy. But also, as we all are experiencing, there's a workforce shortage, and pharmacies are having that same issue. So you're crowding more people into a place that already doesn't have enough staff, and you're giving them more prescriptions that they lose money on. So we heard from a number of pharmacists regarding that they still fill them, but they do it at a loss, and because hopefully they'll be able to make it up on some of those other ones. So some of what we're looking at is trying to figure out, and there's a lot of complexity in there in the pricing scheme. Trying to figure out what is the right form of regulation. How do we keep local rural pharmacies vibrant as businesses to be able to support that community? And that's what we're struggling with. So we had a couple of bills that came forward that try to do that. Some of it's transparency, because some of the other ways that pharmacy benefit managers make money is manufacturers will offer rebates. And instead of those rebates going to the consumer, the person actually at the counter, pharmacy benefit managers keep those rebates. So they make money from a number of different sources, and that's why all their stock is going up. So quite a bit.
So I want to make sure that all the councilors have an opportunity. If you have a question for Charlie, Tammy, Nick?
Didn't the cat tax pretty much take out the pharmacy, the corporate activities tax?
I didn't hear the
Because you put that on your gross sales, or run a business.
It did the small and pop ones.
Yeah, we heard
Mom and
more.
pop.
We heard more about pharmacy benefit managers than we did cat tax. Cat tax we've heard from all businesses, and that's just an assumption. Anybody that has made over that $1 billion in gross, that it has that impact. But we heard more about the pharmacy benefit manager practices than we did about the cat tax having that impact. But undoubtedly, they add together.
I know for us as an organization, this process of the pharmacy managers is of great concern to our healthcare provider. So we were looking at, and I sent a letter, we were looking at incredible increases in our healthcare costs because of what's going on in this area. And CIS was very concerned.
Lonzo, Shelley?
So not so much of a question, but a little bit later on the agenda, so it's an invitation. We're going to talk a little bit about, when we talk about the Transportation and Public Works Committee, we've been doing a project where we're prioritizing our main transportation needs. It's like our wish list. If we could have a ferry, right, just kind of, here you go, here's all the money you want. And so I would invite you to stick around if you can, so that we can talk about what our wish list would be, so that you can know that information. And so if and when something comes up, you have like a little bit of just, here you go, here's what the city of Creswell would love to have happen.
Thank you.
Wasn't there a bill that was passed, though, that does increase our share of what we get from ODOT as far as cities that participate in the revenue sharing program that they have, where they manage our funds from the federal government and we get money out of that?
I don't remember that one specifically.
Oh.
Transportation, from what I've been told, one of the big areas in 24 long session is going to be transportation. So one of those projects, hopefully, as they go and get developed, that it, put something forward to help out with that. But transportation, from what I'm told, is going to be hot in the 24 long session, or the 25 long session.
I would love for you to know what our Creswell needs are.
Yeah, because I do want to know.
Norma?
You may already know this, but on August 1st is National Night Out. Are you familiar with National Night Out?
It's been a bit, but yes-ish.
So I don't know if you're available to come here during that, but the fire departments will be here, and the police department, all sorts of things that might be helpful for you to learn about the region, not just our city.
Yeah,
So
I'll put it on my calendar, see if I can make that.
okay, it's 5 to 7:30.
5 to 7:30 at Holt Park. And it's just a fun
It's fun.
get together. We'll have hot dogs out of the dump
Free
truck.
hot
and,
dogs.
We'll have shaved ice and cookies made by the.
Music.
I used to do that at Island Park when it was Springfield.
It's a lot of fun.
A lot of tents and kids running around having fun doing those things, so,
Eh.
yeah, it's been a few years.
We don't have a volunteer fire department, but they do accept volunteers.
Yeah, I think so.
So maybe that could be part of what you talk about to people.
They have a pretty strong cadet program, and yeah. So. The
You're ready
thing
to go
we
to-
need that's emergency management.
Okay, we're gonna let you, and then Stacy, and then we're gonna wrap up. No, go ahead.
We need a generator that will run this building. We need it like yesterday.
We can, once the Spire grants come out and their program's out, because I think we put 10 million to Spire grants, and that's a lot of what that will do, so we can see about.
We looked at a Homeland Security grant, but the nexus is terrorism. And I can't make a good case for terrorism coming to Creswell so that we can get a generator. I just can't. I'm not able to. Maybe somebody else could, but I'm not able to. But we really need a generator badly.
Especially in case of Cascade Rising problems, problems. We have this wonderful airport that's part of the emergency system. And then the city would somewhat be part of the city's coordination of that arm of it.
Okay, Stacy?
Pharmacy benefit manager. You said that they're behind the rates. Is that accurate? Because it's my understanding that the rates get negotiated with the providers by whoever is managing that product.
Pharmacy benefit managers have networks, and some of it is you have to be within their network and negotiate.
This is how
those
health
rates.
insurance works. That's why I'm asking, yeah. So it sounds like it's very similar to health insurance, yeah.
Very much so, and so those that are vertically integrated, again, that's part of some of the issues is that, they steer people towards their pharmacies, or you have to be part of their rates. And there's some other administrative
Yeah, with my
things.
health insurance, I can only use certain pharmacies. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up and say thank you.
Thank you all
For
very much.
coming.
Appreciate it.
Can I just make one more pitch?
Yes, you may.
Something that we really need your help on is working with DEQ. It's a problem. And we don't disagree with their mission, we don't disagree with where they're heading, but we sure as heck disagree with their methods. We have a moratorium right now because of DEQ that is unnecessary to achieve their goals. The moratorium is for 7 to 9 years. 7 to 9 years of no to minimal growth in this community. And what that does is that impacts our urban renewal. We'll get no tax increment increases for 7 to 9 years. And our urban renewal area is a 30-year program. So we're missing a third of the revenue in that program because of DEQ and the way that they're managing what they want. Of course, there's a big impact on economic development. Huge impact on economic development. We have had, to my knowledge, now I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, we have had no environmental violations, not one. And I look around the state and I see Newport putting waste on the beach. You know, we've got neighbors who put waste in the river, and I do not see this draconian measure put on them. Also, what they're requesting us to repair in our collection system is a small part of the old system. And growth will not impact that. The growth will be new parts. It will be, it won't leak. It won't have I&I. And most of Creswell is new. We just have a very small old section. We have made a commitment to meeting the requirements that they have put on us. And our Public Works Director is working very hard to meet all the regulations without any punishment necessary. And he's thinking that he has shortened at least part of the deadline to 4 years. Upgrading the plant will take longer, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And also, you know, where is the nexus? What they've done is they've told us we cannot connect to our own system until we do certain things like TV the system. Well, we TV the system, that doesn't reduce the I&I, that doesn't address the effluent that's coming out. What part of the problem DEQ will tell you is that we discharge our effluent into a small stream. And that is a problem. We've come to DEQ and asked if we can discharge into a larger stream, and they've told us no. We've asked if we can engineer a discharge into the Coast Fork of the Willamette River. They've told us no. So they are keeping us in this position of discharging into the small stream. The only time we discharge into the small stream is in the winter, because in the summer we land apply it to 200 acres of farmland. So it doesn't even impact us in the summer. And like I said, 9 years of no growth. We had no idea this was coming. This came to us in January, and we found out that we were going to be limited in this way. We understood that we were going to have to do improvements to our waste system, our wastewater system. We understood that, and we acknowledge it. We've acknowledged it for years. What we were waiting was information from them as to what their expectations were. And they were slow, and they did not give us a good idea of what that was. We had no time to prepare. We're losing opportunity costs right now. I mean, there's huge opportunities that are going by us to increase the affordable housing in our community. Our community provides affordable housing to people who work in Eugene because they can't afford to. You know this isn't news. But we have more affordable housing, but it's not going to be that way if we can't grow. It's going to get to be so unaffordable that I don't know who will be able to live here. That has profound effects and considerable harm between any association with their mission. It hurts the economic mobility of our community and our citizens. It harms the people who are low income, it's regressive and creates financial barriers. It impacts the city council's strategic plan for the long run. Their strategic plan has identified housing as something that they want to take advantage of. We can't take advantage of any of the housing measures that are coming out, any of the housing money. We can't, we're stuck for 9 years, 7 to 9 years. And we have tried to reason with the DEQ and they will not hear this. And it is very difficult and very frustrating. So thank you for listening to that. And
You are welcome. Let me know. And
Very passionate.
I don't.
yeah, I feel very strongly about
job.
this.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
I really think they're overstepping their bounds. And I think there is a better solution out there.
Let's meet with- I'm more than happy to meet with them and
I
see
appreciate
what we
that.
can do and see if we can make some progress.
I
Let me
appreciate
know.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And if you can hang around for a few minutes, we're going to get to transportation.
Excellent. I will hang around for a few
Thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we're going on to our committee report. And we begin with Administration and Finance Committee, that's Alonzo.
No report tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, then we go to Public Safety Committee, and that's Tammy.
Yes. We had our last meeting concerning our main charge, which is National Night Out, Tuesday, August 1st. We have Tractor Supply providing a stock tank, Fastmark providing ice, Point S providing bottled water, Farmlands Market providing soft drinks, New Hope Baptist Church is supplying cookies, Santa Pack is having hot dogs and chip meals, plus a meatless option for residents. Counselor Smith has secured commitment from Brad's Cartoons. They're gonna bring a Razor, do I say vehicle?
Side-by-side.
Side-by-side
Three vehicles to
thingamajig.
bring, and
They're gonna bring these big vehicles for kids to check out with mute and have music playing for us. Kona Ice is going to serve shaved ice. We have Humane Society, Crisis Negotiation Team, Family Relief Nursery, South Lake County Mental Health, a local jerky provider will be here. We're gonna have cadets, dispatchers, an armored car, one K-9 unit, an officer that formerly was on staff here in Creswell. That's pretty cool. And the dunk tank. So it's gonna be a really fun family event. Michelle gave us a budget and we've got prizes every 15 minutes. Drawing will be held for prizes. We have crank,
Emergency radiator.
radiator. Is it
Radios.
radios?
Radios.
Oh. Couldn't
We
remember
have
what we decided on. Flashlights and
Solar,
radios.
and we have solar chargers for phones.
Solar phone chargers, Ring doorbell,
Straws.
whistles, and tons of things for kids. Tons of kids, stickers and things of that nature. So, glow sticks, bracelets. Yeah, we're really excited. This year is going to be big. Fire department will be there along with our sergeant and deputy from Lane County. But it's mainly our sergeant's show. He has done a fantastic job of communicating with our committee. So we're really pleased to bring it this year to the city. I think it's Manager Amber's favorite event.
It's a lot of fun. I
Yeah,
highly
it's gonna be a
recommend
lot of fun.
everyone come.
So
Oh, yeah.
that's our update.
5 o'clock next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Thank you, Tammy, and your committee for all your work on this.
It was truly a group effort.
Yeah,
Good.
a lot of excitement going on.
We'll have CERT. CERT's supposed to show up, so we'll meet our certified people and it'll be great.
Well, it's a good night for us to come out of the council to interact with all the people who provide emergency services
Yeah.
to our community. So,
Oh, I
Okay.
forgot to mention one other thing. Everyone received a copy of a letter. We did have a couple of residents that came to our meeting last week, and they experienced a fire on their property because of use of illegal fireworks in Creswell. And it was the day after the 4th of July, and neither of them were home. an alert neighbor saw the incident, and no homes were destroyed, but they have a lot of fence damage and ash and debris, and it's just a mess that has not been cleaned up. So they would like to work with our committee, our council in the future to do more public outreach prior to the 4th of July. And so we said we would have Manager Amberg submit the letter to all of us, and then let's just keep this in the back of our minds as something to work on in the future. They wrote a letter to the Chronicle, and they are open to any changes that any counselor would like to recommend for that. So the letter you received has their phone numbers.
So
And they're open to any.
if we're gonna have your committee work on it, we need to have a charge. So that could either come as a request from your committee in a future meeting. You could put together a request for me for a charge for something you want to work on. And maybe you want to try to fine tune exactly what it is that your committee wants to work on, as opposed to things that are, we might want to do in terms of codes or our police department.
Right.
So can we do that for now? Leave it with your committee and with Manager Amberg, and then if you want to have a charge, September's the first time you'll get one.
Agreed. Yes, that's what our anticipation was.
Okay, that sounds good. Yes,
I've been talking to Alex about having a bicycle rodeo, and we would request a charge from you to allow us to work on that and see what we can do, come up with, probably next year. It would happen, but we might be doing some groundwork.
is this coming from Public Safety Committee?
Yes, from the.
So I'm going to put that back in Tammy's lap for your committee to work on. Anytime a committee feels like this is something we'd really like to tackle, you just need to have that conversation with Manager Amberg, and then bring a request to me, and then we can talk about, when's a good time for the committee to tackle something like that.
All right.
So we'll leave that in your lap.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, we go to Transportation and Public Works. Shelley?
Yes, oh my gosh, I'm very excited to share our update. As you know, I get very excited about transportation and how we can make this better. So as you remember, there was, and so I'm just recapping this also for everyone else in the room. There was a request that came from Lane Act, which is the Lane Area Commission on Transportation, to kind of come up with each city to come up with your wish list, right? So if you had kind of a top 5 items that you'd like to have prioritized, and originally this came from Lane Act so that they could be more nimble in terms of offering support, or if there was an opportunity to advocate for funds, or whatever that is. Lane Act wanted to be able to support us the best way that we possibly could, but they don't know what it is that we need if we don't tell them, right? And so that request came up. The mayor worked to add that to the charge, and so that's what brought about the conversation within the committee. Since that point in time, ODOT has also requested to be aware of these requests as well, so that as they start to think about not only I think the 24 to 27 STIP, they're also starting to plan forward to the 27 to the 30 STIP. And STIP stands for Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan, right? And so this is perfect timing for all of this to come together, and for Creswell to be able to, again, share what it is that they're looking for. So I give you all that background so that you know kind of the top 6 items that we came up with. We thought, well, if they're asking for top 5, let's put a 6 in there, right? Because again, they don't know what we need unless we tell them. And 2 of them kind of go together anyway, so they kind of go hand in hand. And so what we did as the Transportation and Public Works Committee is Cliff was really kind, looked through our transportation systems plan and said, what are kind of some of those big picture items that we really want to have funded? What are those top priority items that we want to have funded? as well as when the transportation system plan was developed, kind of about how much money do we think kind of goes along with that. As you all know, inflation is a thing, and so the money that we thought it would cost us back in 2019 is obviously we need more money. Right? And so I can give you kind of the idea of what we thought back in 2019, knowing that it is more than that. But the top request, and this will be a surprise to absolutely no one in this room, is the jog. Right, is to fund that. And so for those who are unfamiliar with, when I talk about the jog, that is the piece of Highway 99 that comes in kind of over by the 76 station, makes a turn, has some really funky turn lanes, goes over the railroad crossing, and then continues on down Front Street. We happen to know, because we were a finalist for the Great Streets program, or the grant proposal, that if we were to do the whole project, right, so top to bottom, new streetlights, repave surfaces, modernize everything, that's about a $12 million ask. So,
You mean if ODOT were to do it?
if ODOT were to do
own
it. Right, we don't own it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, if the $12 million ferry showed up, right, transportation ferry showed up.
We might give it to the state.
Yeah, but that would involve sidewalks, that would involve a traffic light, that would involve restriping, right? That would involve pedestrians, right? That would involve just so much safety, and just improvements to an intersection that we all feel and drive every single day. So that was our top priority, right? There was no disagreement within that. A piece of that was, let's say we don't get $12 million, right? Is looking at how can we do some interim modernization. So especially along Front Street, which is again, actually Highway 99, we don't have any sidewalks. There's no barrier to go over the railroad tracks, which is dangerous, right? There are a number of people who are coming really fast around that corner, right? The crosswalks are not well marked, right? So that would be the request that we would have. We anticipate, again, in 2019 terms, that's about $150,000. We could look at the draft for the grant proposal to get more specific numbers to that. But that was, as we think about top 6 things, that was kind of a number 2, so kind of connected to the jog. I happened to, just kind of going back to the jog, I was walking that intersection over the course of the last week, and walking with individuals, and there were, in the course of about 5 minutes, I probably saw at least 10 near accidents, right, as I was standing on that corner. And so when I think about safety concerns, that is absolutely number 1. My heart stopped when I saw someone who had the audacity, right, and again, audacity, I'm being very sarcastic when I say that, but they had, the audacity to cross the road pushing a stroller with 2 infants. And I was genuinely concerned about the safety of those 3 individuals who were crossing that street because of how dangerous that intersection is. And so, anyway, so I put that in there because I want y'all to know. I happened to be, when I was walking around, I happened to be talking with Rob Sako, who is the Lane Act Vice Chair, is also the Executive Director for BEST, which is the Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. And he talked about if there is a loss of life as a result of an intersection, that's about an $11.5 million cost to what that is, right? And so as we think about a $12 million ask versus an $11.5 million loss of life, that helps kind of put things into perspective for me. So I just wanted to share that information with you all. Kind of number 2A, I'll call it 2A, request that we had was our South 2nd Street improvements. As you all know, we have Lane Transit District who drives along South Second Street. There's the bus stops there for our two public transportation stops in town. And that actually causes quite a bit of damage to the road. And so we talked a lot about the need for sidewalks. We talked about the need for just repair to that road because it is, again, as we have talked about and connected back to our transportation system plan, South Second Street, it needs work because it is, I mean, I think that is our top priority in our transportation system plan, but it is in bad repair. And so we need that. And we need that repair not only for just what you can see, but we need that repair for everything that's underneath, like all of our systems. So our sewer lines, our everything that goes underneath a street. And so that we needed that quite a bit as well. We also talked about South 10th Street modernization, and so that is the piece where we have a lot of log trucks, a lot of people who are driving pretty fast on South 10th Street, where we have 0 sidewalks. And again, there's if you are a school child or school children and you're walking, and I use that example because I see a lot of kids going to school, that if there's a choice between either getting hit, you have to kind of jump in the ditch, right, to be able to get out of the way of a car or out of the way of a log truck. And so that was a pretty high priority for us as well. We also had South Front Street, so Oregon Avenue to kind of the city limits. And so again, that's part of that interim modernization piece. Again, as we think about just having no sidewalks, there's no barriers for the railroad crossing, right? That was a piece that we really wanted to prioritize. And then finally, and again, maybe this is not necessarily the exact order, but we talked about the northbound I-5 ramp intersections. As we all know, as we're coming over the bridge, right, there is not so if you're coming south, or if you're traveling south and take exit 182, there is a stoplight. There is a stop sign. I mean, like there's some traffic control pieces. If you are traveling north, take exit 182, there is a stop sign, but there's nothing in terms of cross traffic that slows people down. There's a crosswalk there that goes right over the top of the on-ramp to I-5, which also felt pretty dangerous to us and something that we would want to address. We have had accidents there. There have been bicyclists in particular that as they're crossing the road, as they're crossing, kind of doing exactly what they should be doing as bicyclists, they've gotten hit by cars. And so having a traffic control mechanism there in particular for the off-ramp on exit 182. That was another top priority for us. Public committee members, what did I miss?
I think you covered it well.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll say your public works director, Lane Act chair. Is there anything that I missed?
I think you covered it well.
Yeah, covered everything we talked about in the meeting.
So then what's the next step? Do we, as a council, need to take formal action to pass this on via a document of some sort that would be created? What's the next step?
Yeah, so Lane Act has created essentially it's a Google form where we can put in all of our asks and all of our requests. And so that's what they're asking for us to do. And so if this is what you all agree to in terms of just, yes, I agree that this is our priority, then what I can do on our behalf is I can complete that form to make those requests and to start talking about what it is that the city of Creswell needs. Again, the ferry shows up and here's all the money to fund all of the projects. If there are things, and I'm hoping as we have a discussion, if there are things that we missed that we wanted to talk about, that we could get that feedback in this moment as well, so that before we try that. Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that form looks like, top of mind? Like, does it have places to explain why we're asking for it, things like that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just so that you're aware, we're putting together a spreadsheet not only for Lane Act, but it will also be in use for ODOT when they're looking at funding that may become available because a project takes less money. Then it'll be a spreadsheet that they can pull out and they can look at each section that we have and see if there's money that can, if there's a worthy project or a project that meets all the requirements, then that's where the money that they will put towards that project. So it's twofold. It's for the chair, it's for the act, so that we know what top priorities for all our members are and all our jurisdictions are. And then it's also for ODOT to help them also for their funding. It's a tool for them. So it'll be used twofold.
Okay. So, counselors, especially those not on the committee, do you have any questions for Shelley or for the committee members? Nick or Norma or Alonzo?
Just a comment. Thank you for all that great work and good report.
Curtis and Kurt were very instrumental in helping us make decisions.
Okay, so council members, do we give our consent to having Shelley and Michelle communicate about the completion of this form, however you want to do that, and get it into Lane Act? Council members?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent work. Thank you, thank you. Okay, Parks and Tree Advisory Board, Norma.
No meeting this month. We've suspended meetings for the summer,
Okay,
as per usual.
okay.
I miss it.
Well, thank you. Airport Commission, Alonzo.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yes, we just met last week, the 19th, for our regular quarterly meeting. And right off the bat, Manager Humble informed us about, have you guys seen the helicopters lately, last week or so? That those guys utilized the airport, I think it was like 5 of them, a couple of big ones, and kept them with fuel, kept them going as they fought the Height Creek fire. And then we received some updates on some of the ongoing projects that you guys probably have been hearing about for quite some time. The North Lane Taxi project, which was kind of it's a project that is proceeding forward, but is kind of on hold right now due to some concerns that the Oregon Fish and Wildlife have over some the salmon that are close to the Coast Fork. Somehow they're concerned about that, so it'll be on hold. They could possibly have the airport do another study. Hopefully they don't.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Okay. So let's just hope for the best, and it could delay it between like 4 to 6 months or something. So we'll see how that goes as they work through it. Okay, and then the security cameras and the ham-based station that you guys have been hearing about, those grants have been passed, and those are the $25,000 grants with the 10% city match. Those will be actually coming to City Council. When those are becoming next month, I believe.
Next meeting.
Yes, next month. So they'll be before us, and also a $130,000 grant with the 10% match that is for the second phase of that North Taxi Lane project that we just talked about that is kind of on hold. So, and then the big airport runway project, that is kind of getting wrapped up. There's a punch list, which is just the last details of that project, and there's an issue with the concrete pads for the PAPI lights. So again, that's a kind of a snag in the project, but hopefully the contractors will make good on that and get that wrapped up. And the wastewater construction update also. Approval for that by the contractor will also be coming to the city council. That's the one that last city council meeting we decided to put on hold for a month, so that'll be coming back. You guys know about that. And 4th of July, that went really well. The Young Eagles, there was like 64 kids that registered, and 57 of the kids actually flew. And I think it was one of the coolest things that I heard out of the meeting was that one young person was his 7th flight, and he's decided that he is going to become an airline pilot. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then there was some discussion about event planning at the airport. We talked about the open house, the runway, to showcase that runway, but we're going to get, of course, we're going to get that wrapped up. And a couple of other community events that may be going on out there were briefly discussed, maybe like a swap meet for the airport people, whatever airport stuff they sell out there, whatever they're going to do, and then possibly a safety day. And then, gosh, there's a lot of stuff here I'm trying to go through real quick. And then there was the master plan project update. We talked about that. That is coming down the road. Manager Humble met with Century West, which are the consultants that I believe have worked in the last one, and regarding the upcoming master plan. And the commissioner, she updated us regarding the possibility of working with the Oregon Department of Aviation to receive a transfer of AIP funding that had previously been transferred to the Oregon Department of Aviation. So we receive $150,000 a year, but since we had no projects, they were transferred to them. So now that we have a project, Manager Humble is working on getting some of those funds back. That makes sense. So there's $325,000 are coming back, and we've already received like $150,000. No, we receive $150,000 every year. So 2011, 2012, 2013, and 14, we had no project, went away. Now it's going to come back. So that's good news. We'll have money for that. The master plan. So, and then Commissioner Jim Orgloso, who's also our chair, gave us a brief update on a couple of ODART exercises. Those are kind of the emergency plan exercises that they do out there. They had a couple of flights, and they transported some canned goods to Eastern Oregon, and then another one which was actually on a float plane, landed in Lake, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Wahink, Oregon?
Yeah.
Wahink, yeah, okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah. So there was a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on out there at the airport, and then also one more. There will be a drill out there that will be a disaster drill regarding flooding, which is coming from Manager Amberg.
I'm not sure that's going to be at the airport.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, we're going to do a tabletop exercise here.
Okay. So, and at the airport would be part of the exercise. Okay.
All staff will be part of the
Okay,
exercise.
all right.
So I've talked to Shelley about some of her role in it, but
Okay.
it will involve all staff,
Okay. All right.
everyone.
Well, thanks for that, clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the end of my report.
Good. Question.
I'm curious how the Fish and Wildlife thing came about, like,
Because the way I understood it is because the runoff goes into, somehow connects into the creek that connects to the Coast Fork, which connects to the Willamette. So I guess they're concerned about, project debris or something getting into the water.
what I'm curious about is how it came about now and not when we started talking about, okay, I'm just curious.
Because
Manager,
they
there you
did
go.
an environmental report, and in the review of the environmental report, they sent it back to Shelley and said, you need to look at the coho salmon.
Oh, okay, so it was a result of the, actually doing.
It was not originally considered in the original report because their new regulations have come about since it was done, so.
Okay.
And I will say Manager Humble, well, she's got her hand up, but she was commented that she was ready to sign off and send this off as she received the email that said, hold on, they're probably gonna be an issue. Go ahead, Manager Humble.
Just for clarification, anytime we do a federal project, we have to do a certain set of studies. One is NEPA, one is cultural, and the coho salmon are part of an endangered species. and they're on the list. In the past, you've been able to use the words that it should not hinder or harm. Fish and Wildlife has gathered speed on those words and are not at this time accepting those words. And so they are asking the FAA to look deeper into possible harm that could come from the coho salmon. And we have no recourse but to follow the FAA's guidance.
I understand that. My apologies for giggling, it wasn't at you. Just the policing word stuff, I'm over it.
And that was Chinook or coho?
I believe it was coho.
Okay.
But it could be Chinook.
Okay, because there's no coho in
Maybe
the Coast
it's
Fork
Chinook.
or the Willamette.
Yeah, it's-
Okay, all right, okay.
Okay.
There are so many animals that we have to look
there
for, the
endangered
street-torn marks.
counselor?
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
There's no waterway that leads from the airport to the river.
Oh my gosh.
So this is just a matter of completing the national requirements for the environmental assessment and making sure that we use the right language.
Rest assured that we'll work through this and the project's gonna get completed.
Yeah.
Oh, I have confidence in that. I was just curious how that happened because I would assume incorrectly that all of those studies got done, right? You know, so, yeah.
Okay, so we go on to the Lane Council Government. There was no meeting, therefore no report. So now we go on to Shelley for Lane Act.
Oh my gosh, it's a good
Oh,
day when
boy.
I get to talk about transportation twice. So Lane Act met, we meet the second Wednesday of every month, and again, y'all are very invited, encouraged to attend as well. I'm gonna say we mostly meet online, but exciting coming up. So next month, we're actually gonna meet in person in Florence I know, right? I'm very excited. So LTD has offered to put us on a bus so we can all kind of travel together and head over to Florence, where we'll get a little bit of a tour of kind of what's going on for them in terms of public works, what's going on, like kind of what are they struggling with, how can we help, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so I'm very excited. I'm going to take a little bit of time off work to be able to get on over to Florence so that I can learn from another community that's within our, well, what they're doing. And so so that's going to come up. And again, if you're interested in learning more, yeah.
When?
It is it's the second Wednesday of next month. I believe it is August 9th. It is August 9th. Yep. And so
And what time and what place?
so the meeting itself goes from 5:30 to 7:30. If you would like to hop on the bus, I can talk to our Lane Act chair, who will probably be back here in a minute, to see if that is a
If
possibility.
there's room,
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's anyone else that's excited about, I guess let me know.
I have 100% confidence that you will represent us.
No doubt.
I'm worried
Sell a
about you
house
being
that day.
enthusiastic about it.
Ditto.
though. It might not, your enthusiasm.
Sometimes it's a hidden feeling that I have about talking about transportation. So anyway, so that's going to come up, and I definitely encouraged other individuals who serve on Lane Act, specifically those from rural communities, to please try and attend, because it's. I think our urban communities get a lot of press in terms of what they need and kind of how they can be funded and how they put together their programs and their projects and their public works. And our rural communities need a little bit more airtime. So I'm happy to go and be the best ally that I possibly can be to our friends in Florence. So I'm going to be there for that. We also talked a little bit about the meeting that the ACTS had with the Oregon Transportation Commission, which is the OTC. We have some new OTC commissioners, and so one of them is actually a former representative for our area, Lee Byer, and so I have faith that he is aware of what our transportation needs are. One of the things that came out pretty strongly from that conversation is that ACTS are not going away, that the OTC really is looking for feedback from our ACTS to know, again, how best to serve our community. And in particular, they wanted to know about our rural communities and what it is our rural communities need. So that was very exciting for us that we're getting a little bit more airtime with that. So those are the big things. And then, like I said, we talked about kind of that upcoming, what it is I talked about a little bit earlier, but I know they're very excited about doing some big planning. So, but I will get you more information about that meeting in Florence because it's going to happen in person.
Awesome.
Good.
That's it for Lane Act.
Good. Okay, so we go to number 3, which is the presentation, which we've had. So we go to number 4, which is the updating of the street code. And we invite Curtis.
Take a short break, please.
Sure.
Just a couple minutes.
Take a quick break,
Thank you.
and then we'll have Curtis come up. So we're going to have a brief recess. How's your kids' baseball team doing? How many baseball teams are your kids playing on?
Just one.
Just one, your oldest boy?
I held one back so they can play together this year.
Okay. And
We're all done
They
now.
play in the Creswell City?
Yeah, play Creswell City.
What organization do you guys play in? Babe Ruth? Is it Willamette Valley? Babe
Yeah,
Ruth?
Willamette Valley Babe Ruth.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting ready to start football here soon.
Oh,
Yeah.
so did your boys play in some tournaments?
No, they didn't have any.
So my first one in person. I've been watching
Didn't have any tournaments this year,
Okay.
so it works out for the better.
I know.
Anyway.
Yes, I've
Our
been watching
company
online
is doing a
and.
lot of tournaments. The last weekend we did the Pacific Northwest California Regional
Okay.
Championship out at the
So I've been doing,
Todd Norman.
I've been rotating, I've been here for about.
Tyler, her dad, Ted Norman Complex. in-
Just right now, watch the others online.
That was it.
You know.
Started Wednesday afternoon all day.
And Cal Ripken, that's like 13, 14.
Well, this was a 9U and an 11U.
Okay.
Yeah, and they came from Montana,
Yeah, I do.
Idaho, Washington, Oregon, 20 teams.
How do we get lucky to have it here?
Sorry.
They hosted it. You gotta go. 19. They host about every other year. They have a wonderful facility for it.
Baseball lasts a long time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a
Well,
similar
no, they'll go one more
truck today.
step. Last weekend, our company did American Legion in Redmond and
So are you gonna do more?
state softball championship.
Some days are
It's
just
all
that.
wrapping up.
Yeah.
I was worried about your boys.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, we're ready to reconvene as soon as we all come back.
I had a meeting today with the person from the Extension Service, and they would like to be on our Parks and Tree Board from OSU Extension Service.
Oh. They
So
would
I'm
like
gonna have her
to,
fill out a form.
okay. So I think we have one vacancy now, and I sent you an email about my conversation with the individual who applied.
So there's another one.
Okay.
And I'm trying to
good.
convince her that the OSU Extension needs to take over the old schoolhouse and have their programs run out of there.
Oh, well, that's an
Wouldn't that be
idea.
good?
Creative idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
Since
we
they're trying
can't,
to find somebody to take it.
we're not gonna start yet because we're missing a couple counselors. That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Well, we're just, I'm just gonna talk and then whoever hears hears. So I just connected with our Lane Act Chair about attending, if individuals were interested.
Yeah.
She's gonna check into it, and I know she's gonna get back to Norma Jean about that possibility, but if anyone else is interested in attending the meeting in Florence, I can give you more information about that too.
And Counselor, I think it's registration time is here for the LOC conference, which this year is in Eugene. which makes it easy to attend. You don't have to stay the night at a hotel. And that's in October. And probably you've all got emails about that.
I did, but I believe it's, I have another conference that weekend, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm gonna double check, I'm pretty sure that.
They always have a lot of good sessions. They have some different city tours. They're having a tour of Hayward Field this year. Ooh, boy, that's exciting. It's the League of Oregon Cities Conference. It's in October. And I think you should have, I've received several emails from LOC, so I'm thinking that you have
I
too.
definitely have, I don't read them all.
Yeah, it's the LOC Conference, League of Oregon Cities. And the city will pay your registration. You just need to let Grace know you want to attend, and she will register you, so you can pay for that. And there's also, some money available for expenses, so you're looking about getting on a bus to go to Florida. We just started a new year, so yes, you can all register and go.
Do you know if that conference is it required, like, is it like one cost for the whole thing? Can you do partial pieces of it? Okay.
I think there's one registration fee.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can, but I'll double check when I get home.
We've had years past when many of us attended, and the fun thing is you maybe go to some different sessions, but you connect over lunchtime.
Sure.
And you can talk about things you're learning.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, we're all back? Okay, we are ready to reconvene. So Mr. Curtis, take it away.
Testing this, sir. Well, thank you, Council, for giving me a moment to share my presentation. So, as most of you know, I'm the planner with the city, and I have many jobs that are all really cool and I'd love to talk about, but one of my key jobs is to administer the development code. And so the Parks and Tree Board created a tree care plan, and one of their items on their action list was to develop a tree replacement policy in the Creswell Development Code, that included the recommendation of the tree board. And so it involved the development code, and so I was invited into one of their meetings. And first, we're looking at the tree replacement policy, and we talked about whether or not it was yard trees, front yard, backyard, street trees, and we landed on it being street trees because that is something that the city has more control over. It's on public property, and so we felt like if the tree board were to advise in any direction, that kind of made sense. And so first item is, what is a street tree? And so usually the street tree is in between the sidewalk and the street. There'll be like a little landscaping strip where there'll be a street tree. On downtown, of course, there are the 12-foot tall trees that go into the utility lines. In Creswell, we have a lot of sidewalks that are flush against the road. And so street trees may or may not exist on some of those yards. Basically, sometimes there's a section of land that's kind of in front of the property that's before the sidewalk that is actually public property, and it really depends on the size of the right-of-way. In Creswell, we have right-of-way widths that are 60 feet and some that are 45, and it really is a case-by-case basis when trying to determine if some of the front yard is actually part of the public right-of-way. And that is something that is kind of inherently confusing, because sometimes there's a part of your property or part of land in front of your property that very much feels like your property. You've been treating it like your property for a long time, but it actually is within the public right-of-way. So when looking at the action of the tree board, what the goal was is to have a line item that says if somebody wants to replace, remove a street tree, that they have an option to recommend with a suggestion, the ask of an applicant. And so my thought was, we'll just put it in the development code, a line that says a request recommendation of the tree board if you're removing a street tree. And so I found the development code, and then I also found references to street trees in the municipal code. And the municipal code says that a permit shall be obtained from the public works director. And then the development code says it requires a type 1 or type 2 review, which is a land use review. And so the development code is, I think, best applied at the time of development, and a street tree removal and maintenance is kind of an ongoing action of the city's Public Works Department. And so we kind of determined that, or we did determine that a street tree removal permit would be better suited in the Muni Code. And this effectively removes some restrictions for property owners, or removes some process length, because they can just apply for a quick permit. And so in the Development Code, Chapter 3.2, you'll see that there's one section that's scrapped, and it says reference Creswell Municipal Code, Chapter 12.20. And within Chapter 12.20, there's a line that says Public Works Director may require recommendation of the Parks and Tree Advisory Board and may hire a professional forester, hydrologist, landscape architect, etc. And then we said that the hazardous tree removal can happen immediately. We certainly don't want to put our Creswellians in danger, so there's always an option to remove it if it presents an immediate danger. And then we also, it says if you remove it not in compliance with the code, you have to replace it with an approved tree. And then we also allowed trees under utility easements if they're approved by the Public Works Director. The Parks and Tree Board worked hard to come up with a list of about 40 trees, and some of them are slower growth, so they're better for under utility lines. And I believe the intention of the list of street trees was selected to make it as easy as possible on Public Works. The cheapest option to deal with street trees is to not have them, and the second most affordable option is to select the trees based on what is the least amount of maintenance for the city. And so the final item, and so the charge today is to amend the Muni Code, or not today, sorry, this is just a presentation, next meeting. So I'm just sharing the Muni Code and Development Code, and then I also thought it was important to see the application, because this is what our residents will use. And you can see it change from horizontal to vertical. The vertical one is the new one. And there's a line for the Parks and Tree Board recommendation to recommend, not recommend, recommend with conditions. And then we attach the street tree list on the back to make it relatively straightforward. So that way you can hand it off to your landscape person and they can select the tree for you. Any questions? Or comments? Oh, one more item. I presented this to the Planning Commission last week, and they recommended that any minor pruning be allowed without a permit, provided that people use non-mechanical equipment. So if there's a branch that's kind of going into your driveway, you can snip it and it's not a big deal.
Okay, councilors?
Reasonable, seems very reasonable.
Anyone kind of, if I read this correctly, the developer for 2 years would set up the irrigation system, and after that it would go to the property owner? Is that correct?
Is that in the development code?
Well, reading through the packet that you gave, I thought I read in there that it was required the developer had to supply the irrigation for the first 2 years and then it went to the property owner. I was just curious, how does that transfer? Does that mean, what if he develops the street, so it's all gonna be tied in? Is it gonna be individualized to each homeowner?
Yeah, we each have a backflow device.
But not,
Nick, can you tell us where that is and what you read so we can all follow along?
it was just something I wrote, it was something I wrote down.
It's 2 of 3, item F.
Which, are we looking at the development
Page 2
code?
of 3, item F.
Page 2 of 3.
Development code.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or municipal code?
One of them is a 4-page and one of them is a 3. This is the second
Oh, right
page
up
of
there.
the 3-page.
Okay, so by the fact that it's black means this is not a change.
Correct.
This is already there and this is not a part of
Yeah.
actually what you were talking about changing. So if we're not amending it, then that would be something you need to address in terms of just the development, the code. This is not anything that's being proposed as change.
No,
No, this is the
No,
current development
Current.
code, yeah. what happens is,
I'm just curious,
if
when I
I
built my
can,
house, I
what
put
happens is,
I built my own in,
yeah.
and the developer didn't, so I'm just curious how that transfer works. I mean, if he's paying for it for the first 2 years, I mean, how, it's just kind of odd.
I don't see the 2-year part.
I remember.
Oh, I see. He's, it's an E. He's responsible for tree care during the first 2 years. Interesting.
So how that normally transfers is upon a C of O, that the property owner, when they purchase it, they are able to move in. The developer gives that responsibility over to the homeowner because they own the property.
Okay, so it's just built into escrow, there won't be anything else.
That's normally how that shifts over. I think the wording why that's in there like that is there's some developments that go in, and then there's no building, and nobody takes care of the frontage.
Like Sunday
And that's-
Drive.
Yeah, exactly, that's kind of what I
Sunday
was.
Drive's out for a while.
That's that same example I was kind of thinking of, is that right there?
Or View
How's that
Road.
work out for 2 years, yeah, 3 years or something?
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, other questions or comments about what we've got here?
Good job, Curtis, on getting the recommended
Match.
tree list and involving Cliff. So that, great job.
So, Counselor?
Go ahead, you going to say something?
No, you go.
Yeah, just, I'll get my question out of the way. In the memorandum, on the section here where it says, since street tree removal does not typically, in parentheses, occur during time of development, staff removed the section of the development code and updated the municipal code to include a recommendation of the parks and tree. What about a non-typical situation where they would refer to that language, now that it's going to be gone? How would that work?
Well, the language that was removed was for it was, I am planting,
Trimming or removal of trees on request of the city.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, so if a developer wants to, they do need to remove those trees or whatever, but it's not in the code there anymore, so then what would they?
Undeveloped, it wouldn't have street trees.
But it says, yeah, but you never know, it could. It says typically occur during the time of development. So I'm just curious, in a non-typical situation, what would they do? Case by case?
I'd have to look at some of like a recent application to see how this code is written at the time of like planning commission approval. I guess, can you rephrase your question?
Well, if the language is removed for, since if a developer wants to refer to, they say they need some of this language in there. So for instance, the trimming or removal of trees at the request of the city, that's no longer there, right? So like I said, typically, there's not gonna be any trees. But what if there is? If a developer comes in and they're ready to put shovels in the ground and these trees are there and they need them removed. But now would they, I guess they would still come in that? Or they do it themselves, or they just?
I guess I'll give a non-specific answer that the code is written to meet most scenarios, and that for the really like specific one-offs, there's room for variances and some exceptions. I think that if a developer were to come into Creswell, propose a project, the development code would require street trees at a distance of 30 feet apart. And if, like, while that project is developing, that, yeah, there was some sort of maintenance. I'm I'm not entirely sure.
Michelle or Cliff have anything they can add to this? Michelle?
I think in this situation, we would sit down and we would talk about it.
Sure, okay.
And we would work through it as a team, you know. And we have, for example, I think it kind of is an illustrative of the situation, is we have some gorgeous oak trees over there where the Inspired Health is going to build their facility.
Mhm.
And while it doesn't necessarily call it out in the code, we've sat down with them and tried to come to some form of development that preserves those oak trees. So that's not necessarily in the code, but they were worth trying to save. So we just sat down with them and tried to work out a plan that would do that.
So it would be like just case by case?
Yeah.
If that very non-typical situation came up? Okay. And the changes in the form are very subtle, right? And I see that and the only thing I see is that, and long-term maintenance was added, right? Am I looking at the right one? The very first one is the new one, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, which I think is a great idea. And then, just out of curiosity, why the little subtle changes on the reasons for alteration?
Those were decided on by some of the members in the Parks and Tree Board Committee. And I will admit I was more following direction at that point.
Yeah,
Michelle?
these were recommended by Riley Newman, who works for the Watershed Council. She's a biologist.
Okay.
And she determined that these were more descriptive and a better
Okay.
way of making a decision.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that answers my question. That's all I got.
So I just had a couple of items, because this is eventually going to be a code, so mine are some grammatical questions. On page 3 of the Creswell Development Code, this is the red part, so,
The red part's coming out.
yeah. But the numbering, on page 2, it's 3.2.500, and then there's not any A, B, C, D, E, or whatever. But then you get over to page 3, and all of a sudden we have an E that's not highlighted out, and then the black print, trimming or removal of trees. So I don't know about, is this part of 3.2.500? If so, then it probably should be A, not E. That was my first question. And then beneath it is F. Again, question of placement of E and an F seem kind of like it's hanging out there. Just for your thought process. Then on the page 1 of the Creswell Municipal Code, under 12.20.010 permits, the first sentence says that permit shall be obtained from the Public Works Director before planting, pruning, or otherwise affecting a street tree, a tree within public right of way. So, again, question of grammar. Are we saying it's pruning or otherwise affecting a tree within the public right of way, and we should strike a street tree? You see what I'm talking about there? It says a street tree, and then it says a tree.
Maybe it should say or a tree.
Or a tree,
Yeah.
something grammatically there going on.
I think the tree in the public right-of-way is a broader definition of it. A street tree
So we should
is
just
a narrow
strike-
definition, so I think we should strike street tree.
A street tree. And that was all I caught. It's because I know this is gonna be a part of our code, we wanna have good grammar in there. Any other things from the council on what we've been looking at here? Shelley?
I was gonna say, it's not a change, but one of the things that I appreciated and certainly noted was that there's, for both of the both of the applications, that there is no fee. And I really appreciated that there's not a fee attached to it.
Nick?
Back to the pruning, just real quick, I may be missing it, but, so after the 2 years, the homeowner takes responsibility and he's allowed to prune it. And I see the topping, I understand what topping a tree is, the severity, but just basic pruning doesn't need a permit, doesn't need it's his tree, their tree, her tree, whatever. They can prune it as they see fit, as long as they're not cutting it back severe.
Correct, yeah.
As long as they're not killing it.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was in there, because if it's their tree, they should be able to prune it, not have to actually prune it.
It's a little subjective, but yeah, felt like minor pruning is okay. And when does minor
Well,
become
also due
major?
diligence for the tree too, I mean, you know. Yeah, my concern was making sure they didn't have the, if they own the tree, they're gonna take care of it, make sure they don't need a permit to trim it. And if they don't know what they're doing, maybe they should ask for advisement, but we'll make sure that they're not asking for a permit to trim their own tree.
Public Works does go around the city each year and prune the trees up.
Okay, we had a hand from the public? Yes, tell us your name and then your question.
I'm Debbie Yee, and I spoke with you on June 15th and had a conversation with you about part of the trees that came down behind the Dairy Queen in the blank lot there that just disappeared and came down overnight. You didn't have a lot of specific answers for me. I asked if it was permitted. I asked if the trees were diseased. I asked if there was development going on. You hemmed and hawed about some of your answers to me. You weren't very specific. I had originally asked to speak with Michelle. She was not available, but I found out after the fact in talking with Michelle that she was aware that you and I had talked. And questions I have are, you're using words like tree for a tree. You're saying non-specific answers. You're saying subjective, special circumstance. And I guess the gist of what happened in that conversation that day was, it was kind of under none of my business, but I found out a lot of information that they just came down and no, they weren't permitted, but that Michelle signed off on things, which I don't have a problem with. Truly, it's none of my business, except as a community member, if we're setting new guidelines and you're going through all of this and you're saying, now we're gonna just define street trees or do all of this, and we're the tree city, where does it stop? And so someone can just come in one day, take down a half a grove of trees. I asked you, did the Dairy Queen owners happen to know about or be informed or be asked about it? You said you didn't know. There was something about the ash borer beetle being a huge concern. I said, well, if that's your example, then I would expect an arborist had certification to say those were indeed diseased, which they are not, which they're not even the proper tree. I also mentioned to you that if we're that concerned about it and we're doing anything preventative or we're buying the reason or intent of the landowner who took them down without any permit, any notice, any questions, anything, then if that's the case, then almost every tree in the city might be taken down for preventative measures, which makes no sense. So if we're gonna get excited about the tree advisory and the board and trees in our city, what's being done for that particular landowner? What's their intent? You said, well, you could kind of surmise the intent might be they're gonna develop it at some point. I think that's a pretty safe assumption, but Michelle and I talked about it later, and it was like, well, they've committed to putting trees up in the future. Who's taking them to task? And that's a pretty obvious out there. It's not on a street yet. Probably a street or a little bit of development will go in there, but who's going to get to decide how subjective or objective is it going to be? And is it rules for all? So I just wanted to be able to say, because I knew you were here tonight, that you and I had talked. I didn't get a whole lot of satisfaction, but I've since met with Michelle, but that was pretty blatant, and whether it be planning or public works or whatever's going on, that was a pretty obvious thing that's happened in our little town in the last month and a half, 2 months, and it's pretty glaring.
Michelle?
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming and talking about this, because it does need to be discussed a little bit. The trees were removed without our knowledge. That's the answer. What are we doing about it? We're going to demand that he replace the trees. And that's about all we can do. So, yes, he's going to replace the tree for tree with a different species. He's not going to put ash back because of the ash borer. He may have jumped the gun a little bit in cutting down the ash borer, or cutting down the trees, and his excuse may have been the ash borer for doing that, because I believe he did only remove ash trees. So, you know, he may have just, I can't really speak for him. All I know is he did it. And
The property owner did it?
the property owner did it.
Property owner did it, okay.
Yeah, and we were not consulted. We were not aware of it until it was reported to us. And our expectation, and we will hold him to it, is to replant trees, tree for tree that was removed, but an appropriate species, not ash trees.
Okay. Stacy?
Is there a current code on the books that addresses somebody doing what this person did.
Well, the reason why it's a little tricky, or why we care, I mean, if I went in my yard and cut down trees, nobody's gonna care. So why do we care on private property, right? It was in a wetlands.
Okay, and that's why I'm asking, because do we have current code that, where we should be fining them for this?
Wetland isn't even our code, pardon me.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's land planning.
but does Creswell have something on the books currently where there is a fine for not following code, kind of like the basketball hoops? Like, like, do we have something like that for this situation?
This situation, the code says that the solution, the remedy is replacing the tree.
Yeah. And the wetland code, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the educated planner, is not our code. That's
It's the DLCD.
Yes, and that, and I, can I speak now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Stacy, are you,
I had one more question,
Okay,
just really
go for
quick. Was the person that did this, that just the property owner, or are they also a developer that absolutely knows the proper way to do these things?
I can't answer that question. He's a dentist.
Okay,
Fair.
fair.
He's not a
Not a
100%
developer.
developer.
Okay, that's fair.
He's a dentist.
okay,
Um,
Tammy.
I appreciate you being here, Ms. Yee, but I do support the answer that you got from Curtis because the city didn't know. And so, in my personal opinion, it's okay that he said he didn't know and that he, I'm sorry that you felt like he stumbled in answering you. But let's not, let's get all the facts before we say that you were, you're allowed to feel unsatisfied with the answer you got. But the answer you got was to the best of Curtis's ability. And this gentleman has a lot of education, and I have learned through the years of working with him that he's not going to give a quick answer. And that may be why he didn't answer in more lengthy conversation.
Absolutely.
Just asking you to
And
consider.
absolutely, and I did more than consider that, and I did explain to him on the phone. My husband works with him a lot on flood maps and a lot of other things, and the city, and worked with Maddie before then. And I did tell him it was not personal, and then I did know Michelle. I had had a conversation with her before, and I did respectfully follow up with Michelle. So I wasn't accusing him of purposely not giving me an answer. At the time, it was not satisfying, but whether the property owner, were getting ready for development,
Sure.
or anyone could assume there's development to be there later, and this was in preparation of that, it still felt a little sneaky that just one day the trees came down and there's no recourse, because it's sort of like, I'm gonna do it now and ask for forgiveness later instead of permission before, and go through a process. And if he built that dental thing there and he intends in any way, even on partial, to develop it or do something, then I would consider him, what Michelle just said, he's not a developer. Well, he's a landowner, business owner in our city. He kind of knows there's a code. So that's my only thing I want to add to that. But I appreciate your input as well.
Okay, any other counselors? Alonzo?
Ms. Yee, did you have a conversation with the property owner?
No, it's not my place to do that. That's why I went to Michelle first, and when she wasn't available, I didn't ask for Curtis to call me back, but he called me back on behalf of Michelle.
Okay.
So no, I actually came in person, because I almost like ran off the road when I saw the trees down, and I just wanted to ask Michelle, like, hey, what happened?
Okay.
And so that's how Curtis and I started interacting.
Well, I saw you shaking your head no when you said they were ash trees and you said they weren't. So I was just curious, is there any way to, now that they're gone, is there any way to even confirm that they were ash trees?
It doesn't really matter, but.
Well, it would if they were the trees that needed to be cut
But
down.
they weren't diseased and the ash borer's not in Creswell. That was kind of my point, and just being facetious with Curtis was, if that's really an excuse that the landowner gave, it's like preventative for that. Even if it's a couple years down the road, it's like it would make everyone alarmed that the ash borer beetle's here. That was my only point in conversation with Curtis, but they might portray that correctly. Yeah.
Curtis?
Cliff's got something to
Cliff?
Yeah. I was just gonna say whether it matters or not what kind of tree it is. That whole grove is ash trees. There are some oak trees on the Dairy Queen property, but that whole grove is ash trees. So it's not a question whether they're ash or not.
Are they the ones that we're supposed to be concerned about?
Yes.
Okay.
All ash trees are
Okay.
ones we have to be concerned about. The ash borer has been particularly destructive on the East Coast, and they found that there's a possibility that the Oregon ash may be a little bit more stronger and be able to survive it, but that's only like 10% of the trees. So,
So-
yeah, again, I don't think cutting it down at this point is a good defense.
Gotcha.
I think he just
Okay.
cut them down.
So, well, just one more. So there's no, it's not a preventative measure then? It's not necessary to just cut them down because of this ash borer?
I wouldn't say no. I mean, if I were looking at managing my yard and I knew I had an ash tree and I really wanted to plant a jacaranda, I'd take out the ash tree and plant the jacaranda. Because I know that eventually that ash tree is going to die, even though right now it might be perfectly healthy. So, I mean, it's a judgment call in some ways as to when we remove them. The city's not going to remove them until they start dying.
Gotcha, okay.
We have a plan. Cliff and I have discussed it. It goes along with the state's plan and recommendation for how to address the ash borer beetle. And will provide a sanitary removal of the beetle. So, yeah, but we don't expect it for even 10 years, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Stacy?
He'll be my last question on this, I promise. I think. I shouldn't promise this to him. You said that he's agreed to replace the trees. Do we know what count of trees that is? Do we know how many he took?
We should be able to go out there and look at the stumps and.
Perfect. Could we make that a, I want them replaced. I think that wetlands are important.
Absolutely.
And I was really disappointed to see that pile of trees and the pile of boulders that apparently were going to fill their spots, so.
It's my expectation
Yeah.
that tree for tree,
Yeah,
it be replanted with some other species other than ash.
yeah, and I appreciate that.
They will be little trees,
I know.
but.
I realize it's already done.
He will be responsible for making sure that they survive
Okay,
and replacing any that die.
okay.
So back to our street code. I believe that this is slated to be on the agenda for the meeting in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
I know. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. So, council, with the minor changes that we suggested, some grammatical, we're ready to bring this forward to action items?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, we're concluded with this item.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Do you have one more
Curtis.
question?
Yes, I know, but I think we've pretty well wrapped up our council discussion. So unless it's a question, I think we've wrapped up our discussion on this. And you may ask that question to Curtis or to staff members when we're concluded. How's that? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Okay. All right.
Hey, look, what I tell you, huh?
You're welcome, I wish I had thought about it earlier.
No worries at all. I always look
It actually came when you needed it.
strategy.
I know, it's gonna work every time, every time.
That way I can look back after and see I just didn't print it.
No, no worries at all. Recertification, appointment conference, good stuff, but still. Where the first guy did, I was like 2 point something, we're really higher than him. So was that hurting the back end now?
Here, this is the old
Here's like, what if you guys have gone, you gone any further, or if you know any more?
Norma Jean, I'll call.
No, he's sick.
I'll make sure and I'll let you know.
Not like him to miss 2 in a row.
I-
Oh. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Amanda. Questions, you mentioned a letter that was also sent to me as well, right?
Yes, and so,
Whoa.
I have these at home, sorry.